Welcome to Galaxy Brains.
An infinite amount of cash.
I'm your host, Alex Thorn.
The U.S. banking system is sound and resilient.
Bitcoin made a new all-time high.
If you're not long, you're short.
Satoshi's going to come on there, laugh hysterically, go quiet, all Bitcoin's going to be erased.
Bitcoin's the best crypto asset.
Bitcoin is going to zero.
Welcome back to Galaxy Brains. As always, I'm your host, Alex Thorn, head of firm-wide research at Galaxy. Bitcoin not zero, and we have a great episode for you today. Tyler Williams, global head of policy at Galaxy, is back to talk to us about the inauguration, what to expect from the incoming administration, and some of the regulatory and policy shifts we've already seen from the incoming Trump administration on digital assets. Of course, we'll check with our good friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading, as always, to talk about the market impact. And before we get to all that, I need to remind you to please refer to the link to the disclaimer in the podcast notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. We were in Washington all last weekend. We were at the crypto ball and at various inauguration events, talking with lots of folks, members of Congress and policymakers, other industry executives that we are friends with or saw there. There were an enormous amount of people from the crypto industry in Washington last weekend. Overall, a fascinating and incredible celebration of the incoming Trump administration, but also of the digital assets industry, which has really seen its fortunes and anticipation of its future fortunes flip entirely from just several months ago. Lots of interesting stuff there. I would say we're very bullish on this new administration's approach to digital assets. We've already seen certain actions taken. The SEC has created a crypto task force, which Commissioner Hester Peirce will lead. We saw Caroline Pham elevated to acting director of the CFTC. Travis King, I think his name is, at the FDIC. His second bullet point in his remarks was that they want to be more open-minded to innovation and technology, including fintech, digital assets, and tokenization. Of course, President Trump pardoned with a full and unconditional pardon Ross Ulbricht last night on January 21st. It is Wednesday, January 22nd, as I record this, which we think is a good bellwether for the president keeping some of the promises he made to the Bitcoin community in Nashville back in July. So still more to come. I think the crypto and Bitcoin Twitter spheres and communities were a bit jumpy on day one, on Monday. Hoping that Ross would be freed on day one. He was ultimately pardoned and released from federal prison on the first full day of Trump's presidency. That was Tuesday, January 21st. We haven't yet seen a crypto executive order or sort of other stuff, but the Trump administration appears to be aligned and so far delivering on the commitments that they made to the digital assets industry. So lots of interesting stuff coming, I'm sure. I wrote in my report entering the digital golden era on November 10th that it's very likely you could see weeks or even months of positive headline catalysts. So things look pretty good. They look as expected so far, and we'll keep following it. So stay following us, and let's get right into it with Beimnet. Let's go now to our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading. As always, Beimnet, welcome back to Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me.
So, wow, it's been an exciting weekend. Lots of volatility in and around the inauguration. Bitcoin up to new all-time highs at 109 and then back into the 90s and then back to 105. We're at 104 right now as we record on Wednesday, January 22nd. Before we get to Bitcoin and crypto markets, though, what, if any, has the reaction to Trump's inauguration been in traditional markets?
Yeah, so I think the most notable reaction in markets was a function of the softening of the tone with respect to tariffs, and so it seems like Trump is going to be a little bit more thoughtful and patient about his implementation of tariff increases. And so you've seen the market kind of price in that softer tone primarily in dollars, and dollars have been relatively offered since his inauguration. You've seen euro go from 102 handles to 104 handles. You've seen a bit of retracement in things like, dollar CAD. But, in terms of the most notable market reaction since the Trump inauguration, I would say has been in the dollar. The other sort of market relevant thing, has obviously been Trump token. That had a very aggressive launch this past weekend, right around the, crypto conference. And so, it's really hard to ignore an asset that goes to, almost $100 billion fully diluted, in a handful of sessions. But, I think that got more eyes on crypto. Out. And then the other thing of note, obviously we had the $500 billion pledge from, OpenAI, SoftBank, and one other institution. And, the market reaction to kind of it's not necessarily all Trump, but the market has kind of really strongly looked upon AI names, semis, data center plays, energy plays. Those are really strong outperformers since his inauguration. Taking a look at like data center performance over the past 5 days, they're up 12% in the last 5 sessions. Nuclear stocks as a whole are up 18% in the past 5 days. And so, you've really seen the market kind of pile back into the AI narrative in U.S. equities. And so, I think that the main reactions, U.S. equities, a little bit in crypto, and the U.S. dollar.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, Beimnet, I saw earlier today, our time in the morning, but in Davos, so I guess it would have been this evening in Davos, Larry Fink from BlackRock said specifically that nuclear has to be a big part of the AI data center energy needs that the world will have. So just commenting on that nuclear thing, been a long time supporter myself of nuclear as an option for clean energy, large amounts of it. Beimnet, on the crypto and Bitcoin side, what did it look like to you over the weekend? I mean, we ranged in almost like an 8 or 9% range. It was a lot of volatility for Bitcoin. And it looks to have calmed down now over the last couple of days. But what are you seeing there?
Yeah, I think the market is a little schizophrenic right now, and rightfully so. I think the distribution of outcomes is very wide, and I say that because there is a chance that an executive order about crypto gets signed, and it includes language around a strategic Bitcoin reserve or a strategic Bitcoin stockpile. And I would say, that's a really big deal. That is the most important sovereign state, actively considering its Bitcoin policy. And so that I think that has major ramifications for other sovereigns, really large corporates in the U.S. We've already seen, votes in large, mega cap 7 names. And so, I really do think it's a very profound thing to put out into the market, and accordingly, the market's pricing in a pretty wide distribution of outcomes as a function of that, right? And so, I think Bitcoin could easily be testing 120K if there's like serious language around SBR, and given how much positioning there is built up in Bitcoin, I think you could see a pretty adverse sort of reaction to Bitcoin, if there isn't, strong kind of language around an SBR, or the rest of the executive order kind of fails to meet expectations. And so, you're kind of dealing with a binary outcome. And so, that's driven a lot of volatility in crypto. And then, the other kind of really important part to address is kind of the price reaction you had around the Trump token. It seemed like, upon launch, folks were selling a ton of alt tokens and memes in order to purchase Trump token. And so, I think the sentiment around, a lot of crypto projects, is still not fantastic. And you kind of saw that this weekend. There's a handful of alts that have, continued to slide, even in the face of, Bitcoin that has recovered. And so, it's kind of a tale of haves and have-nots, and it kind of seems like the tokens that are ripe for institutional products, U.S.-based tokens that are likely to get U.S. ETFs, and tokens that already have existing products. Those seem to be the winners, and the losers seem to be kind of everything else for the most part that is trading at really high valuations. And so I think with respect to crypto, your next clear catalyst is a potential executive order. The activity you've seen around the SEC and a couple of other appointments, I think has broadly been expected by the market, and so it's tough to price in that much more optimism. And once you get the executive order out the way, I think what's really going to drive crypto on a go forward is, something we spoke about last week, is I do think that the correlation to broader risk assets will be very high for this year. And that's a function of the size, the maturity, and kind of the holder base that Bitcoin currently has. And so, I think crypto executive order as your next near-term crypto catalyst, and then you'll kind of be trading in line with risk, and that might be a good thing or a bad thing, but that's kind of how I see the world.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And those people who are trading it in line or not in line, either in line with risk or as a hedge, they now include some of the world's largest investors. So it's going to be an interesting time for Bitcoin. Let's leave it there. My friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading, as always, thank you for coming on Galaxy Brains. Let's go now to our guest, Tyler Williams, Global Head of Policy at Galaxy. Tyler, welcome back to Galaxy Brains.
Thank you, Alex. It's been a long time, but always a pleasure to be back here.
It has been a while. You've been super busy between the run-up to the election and the transition and all the stuff that's been going on in Washington. And then most recently, this past weekend's inauguration and all the festivities around that. I was there with you for the weekend, just got back myself. But you live there. You worked in the first Trump administration at the Treasury Department, and you live in D.C. It was mighty cold, but I don't know, what other high-level, things would you say about this past weekend in general?
Well, I mean, I think just in general, the weekend was a celebration for the digital asset industry. I think it's been a particularly painful 4 years through the Biden administration. And I think that there was a lot of enthusiasm about what lies ahead. So I think that was sort of how we started the weekend and perhaps where we closed the weekend as well. I think just some of the logistics, I don't know if they frustrated the sort of overall experience, but we obviously, it was moved to an inside inauguration. So that was just like a change. And there is precedent of having that done in the past. But I think that that did sort of influence sort of the attention or the crowd sizes, et cetera. Even though I know you and I went to the rally that was on Sunday at the Capital One Arena, which is downtown Washington, and there was tens of thousands of people waiting in line that didn't even get into the arena. So it was
very cold temperatures.
Extremely cold temperatures, even colder today. But yeah, as the weekend progressed onward, it got colder and colder. Yeah.
There was a lot of people in town. The Capital One Arena on Sunday. Do other presidents? I was like, have other presidents do rallies? I mean, because that one on Sunday, he later did the parade in the arena, which made a lot of sense because it was really, really, really cold. But separately from that, even before the inauguration ceremonies and parade themselves were moved indoors, he had planned a rally on Sunday. Other presidents, I don't recall, President Joe Biden doing a rally.
I don't know of any president who's done a rally of that sort, but maybe we can look back in the history books and find something. But I in recent memory, I've never seen any president do that. But the President Trump likes the sort of pomp and circumstances, and like there was certainly a time to do that if there ever is one.
Yeah, it was. Kid Rock gave a performance there that was actually very good. I haven't listened to Kid Rock since like Ba Wata Ba from, I don't know when that was, 2010, 2008. I'm not sure. But I was really impressed, actually. Guy plays guitar, sings. He
He
got
does
on
it all.
turntables.
Oh yeah.
It was pretty
That
impressive.
was actually the most impressive thing. The turntable exhibit was very impressive, I thought.
I know, it was unexpected. I want to ask you some of the early moves. I know over even yesterday, so we're recording on Wednesday, January 22nd. Yesterday and Monday the 20th, the president was sworn in the Capitol Rotunda at noon. Tuesday the 21st was sort of his first full day. And I know on Monday, the crypto industry was looking, remember, President Trump was signing all of those executive orders, a bunch of them on stage at the Capital One Arena, then later many more in the Oval Office. And the crypto industry was waiting to see if there would be an executive order relating to digital assets or crypto, and didn't see that yet. I haven't seen it yet. And getting a little impatient, I would say, on Twitter. I feel like the crypto industry.
You and I have had this conversation like dozens of times about like what to expect, and like we saw the expectation is that the digital asset crypto executive order would be in the first couple hundred executive orders, and like I think we're still on track that might be true. However, like I think the industry needs to just recognize and be thoughtful and considerate of the fact that even despite the president being supportive of our industry, there's a myriad of different things that he has to pay attention to. And while we are an important part, we need to be a little bit patient with the speed of which how some of these things happens. And like you have to deal with immigration, you have to deal with trade, you have to deal with like interacting with other foreign sovereigns, there's other more important things at the moment.
Yeah, I think crypto likes to think it's the main character in general. There's plenty of other things to work on, but we did get some already, which I think was heartening for the people that have been impatient about it. One, I saw that SEC Commissioner Mark Ueda was made acting chair of the SEC, and has
the
already,
same with
you
the
know,
CFTC. We saw Commissioner Caroline Pham become the acting chair of the CFTC. If like you think about what has happened at both the market regulators, we've moved from positions where we've had, I think Chair Ross Benham at the time was like more supportive of the digital asset economy than his counterpart at the SEC, Chairman Gensler. But like we've moved into a realm where the come in to talk to us mentality is actually real and earnest.
yeah, and you had one of his first acts that now acting chair Ueda did at the SEC was to implement a crypto task force, which itself will be led by other SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce, former guest on this show and strong advocate for the digital asset industry. That seems like a great first step.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're drawing up a pros and cons, figure, like this is definitely like a big pro. Like we're in a world now where you can walk into the SEC, have a conversation with them. They want you to do that, and they're going to catalog like what they think they can work on. So I think it's a progressive first step, particularly understanding that we have in a SEC chair nominee, Paul Atkins, who was a former commissioner, who both Commissioners Peirce and Ueda used to work for. And when he is confirmed, which I would expect would happen within the first quarter, maybe it bleeds into the second quarter of this year, just depends on sort of the ability of the Senate to work its will. But they're going to do a bunch of work on the front end of him even getting there. So when he gets there, he's in a position day one to act. So I don't know how you could be negative on any of these things happening, notwithstanding the fact that the crypto EO hasn't come out yet. I mean,
Yeah,
if you think about it, it's kind of ridiculous that crypto Twitter is, up in arms about a piece of paper coming out when like we're just in a different world now. So, relax a little bit.
Yeah, totally. It's hilarious. I think they thought he was going to take the swearing in and then put his hand down and then, instantly like sign a crypto EO, like while he's standing there next to the Supreme Court.
He's going to I'm looking for my pocket Bitcoin white paper. He was going to take the oath.
Yeah, exactly. Another one I wanted to ask you about, Tyler. I saw that that Travis Hill became acting chair of the FDIC. And one of the things I thought was also another very strong signal here. Of course, the FDIC operates the Federal Deposit Insurance Program for banks, and they're a regulator of banks. And they've been accused of being very involved in the Operation Choke Point 2.0 stuff. We've started to see some information come out about that. I think Coinbase, the History Associates lawsuit, which Coinbase I think was involved in, had some Freedom of Information Act releases from the FDIC that seem to show a pretty coordinated effort to dissuade banks from even banking crypto firms. But in the FDIC press release from yesterday, it says, Travis says, "It is my honor and privilege to serve as acting chair while the FDIC faces a broad range of issues, and as always, we'll fulfill our mandate, blah, 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 blah. I expect the FDIC to focus on some of these matters in the coming weeks and months. The first one is conduct a wholesale review of regulations, guidance, and manuals to ensure our rules and approach promote a vibrant, growing economy." And the very second bullet that he says is adopt a more open-minded approach to innovation and technology innovation, including one, a more transparent approach to fintech partnerships and to digital assets and tokenization, and two, engagement to address growing technology costs for community banks. So right there at the top of incoming acting FDIC chair Travis Hill's statements was digital assets and tokenization and fintech.
Yep. I would put it in the same bucket as all of the other comments I just made about we're just moving into a posture where like, we're more open and accepting and receptive to the come and talk to us. And it's not how I read what you just read to me is that he's not saying that they're going to do anything. He just said that they're going to have the conversations and they're going to explore it. That's how I read it.
Yeah. He said adopt a more open-minded approach to innovation.
Yeah. Adopt an open-minded approach to me is we're going to create a process that if you're a crypto firm, you want to partner with a bank, or if you want to do something with the FDIC, that we're going to be able to talk to you. And it's not going to have like negative recourse action items in the back end.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think Robinhood had written, they had been sent a Wells notice by the last SEC, and they had said that they had met with them like a dozen times and given them tons of information. But then rather than that being reciprocated from the SEC, the information was used as the basis to bring an enforcement, right? And that this sounds like, okay, you can come in and talk to us. We have an open mind, and we're not going to immediately, sue you if you knock on our door.
Which, like, that's just a different place.
Yeah, it's meaningfully better for sure. All right, one other thing too that happened last night, which sort of the end of the first full day of President Trump's first full day in office. He did pardon Ross Ulbricht, the founder and creator operator of the Silk Road, the infamous marketplace on the dark web from the early teens, which used Bitcoin as the currency of choice. People, again, another one were Bitcoin and libertarian Twitter. This is something that President Trump, then nominee Trump, promised the Libertarian Party. He went to the Libertarian Party's national convention, wasn't nominated by them, but promised them that he would do. He also promised at Bitcoin Nashville, and I think one or two other times he tweeted it, that he would do, and he did follow through with that. Bitcoin Twitter was getting apoplectic that it didn't happen in the first 6 hours of his presidency, but it did happen by the end of his first day. Does that say anything to you as far as him signaling about keeping his promises to these communities that supported him?
I mean, there's literally two mantras of his presidency, both from last time and this time, which he restated, which is make America great again and promises made, promises kept. So I would put this in that bucket. And he reiterated the same sentiment at Bitcoin 24 in Nashville, and he followed through on it. So I would expect that he would do the same for the digital asset economy, like he did with Ross Ulbricht. I would just say that Bitcoin Twitter and crypto Twitter are both impatient beasts. They should learn a little patience.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I just want to step back a little bit. What do you think on timeline in general? I think it's helpful. You said Paul Atkins likely confirmed at the end of in Q1 or early Q2. I think Jay Clayton was confirmed in I guess it would be 21.
It was May of his
May.
year.
Yeah, in May. In fact, he
May
was
of
confirmed
17.
I think he was confirmed. It was 4 days before Coinbase successfully So 4 days. Coinbase went public successfully in the U.S. 4 days before Gensler was confirmed, and Clayton was also later. So, and Gensler I think was in April of 21. Sorry, Clayton in 17, Gensler in yeah.
Yeah, I think it was late April. I want to say April 22 for Gensler. It's like sticky.
So we don't expect Atkins for a couple months, but he's got two former employees and colleagues sort of operating at the SEC already. What else timing wise? I mean, do you think you'd see something like, for example,
I think we'll get in. We'll see. Like we obviously have David Sachs, who is the crypto AI czar. I think what we'll see in the early innings is that you'll have this executive order come out, and then we'll see some of the formation of like whatever the task force or the bodies that are going to be the sort of the nucleus for information flow and ideas on both AI and crypto. And obviously there's like overlap there. So I think we'll see that happen. And that can be instructive to some of the legislating that is going to go on. And I think we've seen statements and commitments from the incoming or now the chair of the banking committee, Tim Scott from South Carolina, and Chairman French Hill of the Financial Services Committee. So I think what we'll see is a little bit of a merging between the ideas that are at the SEC, the ideas that are at the CFTC, with the White House and the policy nucleus on crypto. And then we'll see that sort of flow into the legislating. So it's a lot to choreograph, but I think that's sort of how the first half of the year will shape up.
And what about on the banking regulator side? We've talked about the interpretive guidances that then acting comptroller of the currency, Brian Brooks, had done under Trump's first presidency that opened the door for national banks to issue stable coins and use blockchains. And other easements maybe for banks to get more involved. Like, is that timeline similar or is that a little different, you think?
I think it's a little faster. I think it's more predicated on the speed by which Secretary nominee Bessent gets confirmed. He got voted out of the Senate Finance Committee yesterday. I would anticipate he gets confirmed pretty expeditiously, but it's literally just like a function of managing floor time and how the calendar and the clock works for considering a nominee on the Senate floor. We don't need to spend too much time on that, but I think it'll happen soon. And then, the comptroller or whoever is appointed as the acting comptroller is really at the discretion of the Treasury Secretary. So I think we'll see someone come in there pretty quickly. And then even on an acting basis, that person who is the acting comptroller can then move to reconsider or reevaluate some of these interpretive letters and guidances that have been promulgated and put forth by acting comptroller Sue at the OCC that sort of took down all of the work that then acting comptroller Brooks had instituted at the tail end of the Trump 1 administration.
Speaking of Comptroller Sue, I just recall that I think it was the DC Blockchain Summit maybe a couple of years ago. He gave a keynote address. Do you remember this? And we were there, and he said something like, it's been widely reported that I'm an antagonist of digital assets, and we're all like, but then he proceeded to give a very, I would just say, mean speech to all the people. Also sort of comes, is, or at least seen to be part of Senator Elizabeth Warren's orbit. Warren, now the ranking member on Senate banking, with Sherrod Brown's defeat by Bernie Moreno, and John Donenberg back from the NEC to be her chief counsel on that committee. How much of a antagonist do you think Warren can play an impact in that role? Or maybe even a little bit of the dynamics of how Senate banking even works, right? Because it's the Senate, it's not the House, right? Senators have pretty strong powers even in the minority.
Yeah, listen, like any individual senator, even if they're in the minority in the Senate, can make it difficult to advance legislation, can make it difficult to advance nominees. At the end of the day, if you do have a majority because of the rule changes that were instituted when late Senator Harry Reid changed some of the Senate rules that you can consider nominees with a 50-vote threshold. Like, that changed the dynamic a little bit in the Senate, but still, to proceed on legislation that doesn't affect the budget or affect money things, you do need 60 votes to get cloture to consider anything. So it changed the dynamic. So I'm saying that to give a backdrop to say that Elizabeth Warren, who, as we all know, is a antagonist and a non-believer in our industry, she can frustrate that process, and she has some very talented staffers that are in and around her orbit, and I do think that they can make things difficult, and they can be a counter balance that is going to be a formidable enemy, I guess I would say. Maybe enemy is a strong word. That can be a formidable foe, so to speak.
Yeah, I think she sent like a 15-page letter to Secretary nominee Scott Bessent about everything. It had plenty in there about digital assets as well.
It did. I don't expect her, like, when you graduate from being a senator on the banking committee to being the ranking member, the chair of the banking committee, you have to remember that if you look at the banking committee's remit, it isn't solely digital assets. So, there's an open question of whether or not there's digital assets at all, right? The banking committee has jurisdiction over the FDIC, the OCC, the FHFA, that is the housing finance regulator. They have jurisdiction over the Federal Reserve. They have jurisdiction
the SEC.
Over the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development, HUD. They do appropriations on rail cars. Not appropriations. They're the authorizing committee on like rail cars and things like that. So there's just stuff that
they have a lot of other stuff to work on.
Yeah.
You mean it's
Export
not just
control at the Commerce Department falls within.
I was told this was a crypto Congress.
Yeah, it's a Congress to which crypto has a lot of allies. It isn't a Congress that is solely focused on crypto.
All right, and maybe last question here, Tyler, which is sort of related. Since they're not just focused on crypto, what are they focused on? I saw that outgoing Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen sent a letter notifying the Congress and that we're about to hit a debt ceiling imminently. It sounds like we're close to having to introduce extraordinary measures, which is, I guess, moving money around at Treasury to like keep the lights on. That's got to be urgent.
Prioritization of money.
Yeah. Is that, have you heard anything about, I know everyone's still busy and just finally sort of getting back to work after inauguration, but what's the status on that, you think?
There's a lot of things that Congress has to clear the decks on pretty quickly, which is why we have seen sort of the four corners of the House and Senate leadership being the Speaker and the Minority Leader, and the majority and minority leaders in the Senate meet with the president and meet with the caucuses to try to advance some of these discussions. They have to clear the decks on some of these funding debates. And this is why we've seen some of this talk about the 1 versus 2 bill approach to reconciliation. The president is trying to figure out how he continues his legacy on tax reform from the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And there's two different split approaches, I would say, at present. The president and the speaker are looking to advance this 1 bill approach to solving some of these issues, being tax reform and other funding issues and other money issues. And then the Senate is looking at a 2 bill approach to dealing with taxes and then some of the other items that they can in reconciliation. All of it is complicated by the funding instructions for the government. So it's very important that we figure out how to do the debt ceiling issues and how to do a continuing resolution or a bigger appropriations bill and couple that with the budget stuff. So it's a lot. It's a lot. So that's what I'm saying. Like when crypto is not at the top of the list, it's because they have all of these things that pay for the rest of the government.
And that's not even talking about the president's other well-known priorities like immigration, tax reform, or extending the tax cuts and all the myriad other things as well.
Yes,
so
exactly.
That's just the most near-term stuff.
That's right. That's right.
They're busy. They're going to be busy. Don't tell anyone that working in Congress is an easy job because
It's
They
definitely
also
not
call
easy.
you back to work, by the way, at like, 10 o'clock sometimes. You got to come in and sit in there, and like, it actually sounds pretty bad.
Depending on when votes are, sometimes the vote schedule is not ideal.
Yeah. Well, that's it for now. My friend Tyler Williams, Global Head of Policy at Galaxy. Thank you, as always, Tyler, for coming on Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
That's it for this week's episode of Galaxy Brains. Thank you to our guest, Tyler Williams, Global Head of Policy at Galaxy, our man down in Washington, and our good friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading. As always, everyone have a safe and happy weekend, and we will see you next week. Thanks for listening to Galaxy Brains, the weekly podcast from Galaxy Research. If you enjoy the show, please like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To follow Galaxy Research, sign up for our weekly newsletter at gdr.email, read our content at galaxy.com/research, and follow us on Twitter at GLXY Research. See you next week.